Hi everybody. Yeah, okay. I just randomly picked a section. No, it wasn't random. I did a lot of analysis to work out which piece to bring in. Okay, this is just the book is called Writing in Immanence. I have to read it because I've forgotten the title. Writing in Immanence, Concept Making and the Reorientation of Thought in Pedagogy and Inquiry. It's, I believe it's coming out at the end of the year with Routledge. And before, as a preface to everything, I just want to pass some thanks, gratitude to Hannah Shakespeare, who was our editor all the way through the process and hugely supportive. Thanks, Hannah. So, yeah, I know. Sorry to embarrass you. Okay, so this is just I've written the book. If any of you have seen any of my previous work in any previous books, I've tried to challenge the linear structure of textbooks. So in my previous book, I used Deleuze and Guattari's notion of plateaus and the opportunity, therefore, to jump from one place to not one plateau to another. In this, again, I've drawn from Deleuze and Guattari and their theory of the actual and the virtual. And what I've constructed the book around, if construct is the right word, I've constructed around the book around this dramaturgical trope around acts. Yeah, so Deleuze and Guattari says that we don't have a binary of actual and virtual, we have actualization. It's actualizing, it's always happening. So that I felt that gives me the opportunity to have multiple entry points into the book. So the book is, as I say, constructed around these acts. So this is just a small section from one of the acts, okay? I'll read from the top, but I think Dan and I would be really welcome having a discussion and a chat and talking about it as well, wouldn't we?
We would.
Yeah. Yeah. Have I given you enough time to find your bit?
Yeah, getting there.
Okay, here we go. Obviously, this is taken out of context in a way, but hopefully it will work. It's got some would say it's got a bit of theory and it's got a bit of, practice stuff. By way of exemplification, Whitehead's emphasizing of process over substance can also be made sense of through Manning's reading and bringing to life of Simondon's concept of information. That concept is hyphenated between information. Yeah, so if you're familiar with the word information, there's a challenge there to the idea about it's always information, it's always on the move. Referring back to the last speaker who talked about process, informational is about the process over the substance. The concept of information is also linked to Deleuze and Guattari's processually active practice of concept forming as event, and in bringing to life what they refer to as a free and wild creation of concepts as a force that does. The creation of the concept is generative of a relational encounter, a force that is eventfully about movement. As they say, a concept also has a becoming that involves its relationship with concepts situated on the same plane. Having a finite number of components, every concept will branch off toward other concepts that are differently composed, but that constitute other regions of the same plane and participate in co-creation. And so, in relation to these processual reinventions of embodiment and embodying, the bringing together of the concepts of the body without organs and that of ontogenesis, brought to life in the discussions of the preceding passage, helps to generate and animate movements of ontological indeterminacy. In processually always moving toward, it can be said with a sense of intentional paradox that embodiment embodies, lol, the capacity of movement to the ever always not yet known. It is as in embodying as an immanent practice in the constant creation of concepts as event, bodying as doing is always in excess of how it appears. Its appearance opens up speculation in terms of what might be a coming to reality. It is also congruent to be working with Masumi's practice of exemplification, in that the offering up is a speculative doing of exemplifying, of saying, well, what if we see the body as? My father worked as a stonemason. In his work, he would build dry stone walls. In the field where the wall was to be made, he would stand beside a large pile of stones, granite, elven, maybe slate, all piled randomly, ready for making the wall. From here, he would look across to the soon-to-be emergent wall close by. He would look from the pile of stones and then across to the wall, to where the wall was to be, looking from the one to the other, and then again from the one to the other. His expression would be serious. He would take out and open up his tobacco tin, take out his papers, remove a thin sliver of paper from the little orange pack and place it between two fingers of one hand. Then he would carefully remove a swatch of tobacco from the tin, place it between thumb and finger of the other, and smartly, without thinking, neatly roll the cigarette, place it between his lips, light it, take a deep drag, and then look once more at the soon-to-be wall and the pile of stones. Then, almost suddenly, with determination and focus, he would move to the pile of stones, bend down, and pick out the one that he knew he wanted. He would stand with the stone in his hand, looking at it, delicately turning it once, twice, in the strong grip of his fist, all the while glancing purposefully across to the emerging wall, and then, with a quick, deft movement, he would place the stone in the wall. The wall called the stone. My father heard the call. The stone would fit perfectly. He would look at his work with what appeared to be casual satisfaction, and then he would begin the process again. He would call this process of stone selection and placing in the wall, offering up. I would sit with him, watching. Occasionally, I would pick out a stone and ask him if I could offer it up. He would smile, nod, and watch my efforts. It was unusual for the wall to accept my stone, but Dad never discouraged my attempts at trying. The speculations involved in the offering up of the concept might not anticipate or even work to create necessary conditions for the existence of the body, but it will always be a sufficient condition for the doing that is taking place now. In this, it might also be said that the concept is information. It's always coming to form as an exemplification of Manning's way of thinking of a minor gesture and how the gesture might be seen to act. It is gestural in that it does. It might point to, it might suggest. Its explication might offer a what if. It can be done, it can be all or none or some of these things. It is sufficient that it does. It has been put to work. That is all that is necessary. So, in paradox, it holds nothing. It keeps nothing in place. Its embodying is frail, partial, and compositional. In its doing, it is on the way. In its coming to life, in the thinking, feeling, expressivity of the concept, its embodying is both luminous and opaque. A movement creates a bright light. It flashes, and then, as it was, it is gone. This is not illusory. This is not a moment that is lost, that has not been captured. It is a living and a worlding as an imminent critique. It is shifted, it is moved, changing has happened. That is all. That is everything. The movement in the moment of the movement can only be sensed as embodiment, as potentiality. In that flash of bright light, virtual space making is happening. The actuality of the concept forming as event is part of, was animate in actualizing. The virtuality of that space making is also temporal. It is still happening. The concept is still alive. It is still doing. Its form is information. Its doing is eventful in its presencing. It is alive now. It is not a was. It is a speculating, fabulating movement moment in the here and now. Space-time making.
I'll read a few minutes and see where that gets me. And so we have enough time to talk about publishing. But before I do, as is the custom in Australia where I live, I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land here that we're meeting on and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And in addition to that, as a migrant to Australia, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of land I am privileged to live and work on, and that's the Allakit Willam clan of the Great Eastern Kulin Nation, and to acknowledge that their lands were never ceded, and that I and all other migrants to that land and to this land benefit not just from that as a historical truth that needs to be foregrounded, but as a rich cultural legacy from which I and all of us continue to benefit in an ongoing, fabulating manner. So I thank them. This is from a book of mine that was published, I think, last year called Creative Agency. And the book came out of a 5-year study I've been doing on creativity in East Asia and Australia. And I have been all 15 or so years of my career very much based in autoethnography and applied creative methods. And one of the things that's occurred for me over the last 8 or 9 years is I've gotten these very large funding for large scale projects. And so I've done 2 of these multinational, multi-sited ethnographic projects. And the tension is how to carry the relational and how to carry the creative methods with a mixed method, quantitative, qualitative, kind of more traditional study, and still do activist, relational, creative, collaborative work in that. So this book is me trying to grapple with some of the work from that study on creativity, and also writing from an autoethnographic and post-humanist and new materialist point of view through the COVID academic and me walking on the land, which is a beachside and canal side place where Stacy and I live and work. So it references all of that. And I wanted it to be, to also bring into consciousness the intercultural or transcultural aspect of that work and how problematic in a way it is as a white Western person doing that work. The necessity, I see the necessity or the commitment of that work, but also the problematic of it. So the book is structured in chapters, and then between them there are these intermezzi, and this is from intermezzo 5 called Water, and parenthetically Badu, which is the local Sydney-based indigenous word for water. Sydney is a city known for its harbor. The Harbor Bridge, the Sydney Opera House, Darling Harbor, the ferry to Manly Beach. For most visitors and many locals, it is these manufactured elements of the site that remain most iconic. But it wasn't always this way, of course, and for many, the water itself is still the most important focus. Since 2017, though, a new initiative draws clearer focus between Sydney's indigenous histories, resilience, and relation to water. Through a curated series of Aboriginal stories, the In Development Sydney Harbour Walk will present an innovative way to inspire the public to experience the harbour foreshore in a way that is not currently available. Aboriginal curator Emily McDonald, and she identifies as Aboriginal, she doesn't use the word Indigenous. Sometimes people are unclear whether it's okay to use the word Aboriginal. We are led in Australia by our Indigenous colleagues who tell us how they prefer to be identified. So Aboriginal curator Emily McDaniel is providing recommendations for the Storytelling Harbour Walk, outlining ways to present the Harbour Walk as an acknowledgement of country. It aspires to weave a story about strength, survival, and continuity using a range of different artistic media. The 9-kilometer walk will be named using a Gadigal word, the name of the area's traditional custodians. Visitors will be led around Sydney's famous foreshore by stories of water, reminding both locals and visitors of the long-standing Indigenous histories here and the creative and cultural significance of those lives, practices, and relationships, both human and non-human. Gadigal were one of 29 original clans here, collectively known as the Eora Nation, and water was at the center of their lives. This is the words of Emily McDaniel. This is about you seeing what we see, she says, you feeling and hearing what we hear. It's important to feel a place, not just visit a place. We think of country and water that is living and breathing. You have to take time to get to know it. This is not Emily, these are not Emily McDaniel's words, but still the attendant words to the plan or the map of what's been published. The plan is unusual, not just in joining Indigenous artists within universities, industries, and marine museums. Is that really unusual? But in its focus on celebrating the harbor's diverse sea life with a proposal for installing a hydrophone to hear sounds from the sea floor. Emily says, we've become detached from the harbor and our relationship has suffered, she says. We want people to dip their feet, to remind them they are standing on the edge of this sunken valley, many thousands of years old. End quote. The Harbor Walk seems not yet to be open, but has received government support since 2017 and hopefully will be available in 2021. It hasn't come to fruition yet. The 12 featured sight lines along the walk will be framed by text and audio installations. Sightlines are relationships between sites of historical and cultural significance, including hidden histories, which recognize the connection between indigenous acknowledgements of country as land, water, or Badu, and sky. This is my voice. It makes me wonder why I don't talk about land, water, and sky when I say where I'm from, or what makes New York, New York, or thinking about the ways in which I'm creative or uniquely understand the world from that place, which was the focus of my study. But why, I keep wondering, is it hard to see the Gadigal connection to water at the most famous foreshore area in this country? I mean, I know, but also I don't know. And what does it mean to provide non-Indigenous people and outsiders with sightlines when, as Emily McDaniel says, what's important is to feel this place, not just to visit it? So I ask, will we experience the water as living and breathing when we visit there and walk this walk? And what does it mean to walk a walk and be helped to maybe see this place more as they did, as if that were possible? Over 200 years after our hosts have been violently displaced or murdered and still suffer as an ongoing result. Is there a danger in suggesting to non-Indigenous people that we can experience something like they are after 40,000 years of continuous habitation of a place and its waters? I'll leave it there. About 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's really good.
I don't want this to be a meeting-led thing.
Yeah.
I like our community just to converse. So please feel agency to reflect, comment, to allow your body to communicate what you felt from hearing those two pieces. And I both been moved by both of them. Ken, I really got your dad holding the rock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, you know, David and I did that Surrounded by Ghosts.
Yes.
Yes.
The rocks
Yeah.
and the feel of that.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the feel of your land as well.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's evoking stuff in here.
Good. Great. Thanks, Katrina.
I think for me, one of the things that both of those passages evoked is really like, what work is each book doing? And I guess if I do a lot of talks on publishing and research. Oh, mom's back. big happenings outside. It's like, I think a lot of students and early career researchers want to know how to get published, and it's a very kind of hungry question, rather than a question about what work is each piece of your work doing, and that helping to guide you to where its best home might be. So I guess I'm curious in the group whether there are people who have those kinds of concerns or questions around homes for work, especially these days.
I mean, to add a provocation to what Dan's just said, which I
They're
agree
drinking
with.
the water.
Yeah.
They're almost drinking the water. It's a post-human moment of Badu. Sorry.
That's okay. There's a real sense in which I would want to bring the way in which Deleuze and Guattari read and use desire. Yeah, there's not a sense of lack in here. I think Deleuze and Guattari talk about desire as being productive, and I know there are other folk, both in the room and who have been here today, who've written books or are writing books, and I think that that your desire to write the book has to be productive. I think there's almost a sense that you have to love the work. Yeah. Again, I'm not really sure what that means, but there isn't a lack in your life when you want to write a book, but you have to have that productive desire, because that's what pushes you through it. I find, so I think that kind of adds to what you were saying there, Dan. Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, were there any points in your process where you doubted what you were doing or your ability to finish?
Yeah. I mean, for a start, I don't, again, with Deleuze and Guattari, I'm very sensitive about you're constructing, thinking about a book around beginnings and endings. So I have a sense, and you know this, Hannah, that the book began a long time before I actually began, when we were in Malta in February 2020, just before lockdown. And there's a real sense in which it's still being written now, it's still coming out, yeah. You know, there is that kind of middling sort of sense of going on. But certainly because there was a conjunction between the writing the book and the 2 or so years of the lockdown period, there were times of anxiety, there were times of depression, there were times of WTF in there, you know, when I'm thinking, oh, is there anything worth this? But ultimately, it's linked to ontological indeterminacy, I think. But overall, there was that productive desire. I wanted to get it out there. I felt as if I had something in me that I wanted to say, yeah, and that remained a kind of consistent, energizing force, yeah, even though there were periods when I didn't write a thing.
Yeah. Elise, one of our people online has got a question. I see your hand up. Elise, over to you.
Thank you. I'm so struck in both of your work that it's ongoing evolution, in that it really manifests what it's arguing. Having watched your work over years to find water, which is central to Ken's way of being and thinking, central to yours and vice versa. Ken, this evolution of movement and becoming now in these pedagogical spaces, the notion of information as ongoing conceptualization, to me takes your thinking, as I engage it, 3 steps farther. Oh, yes. And really seeing that extended. I think so often we tell students, embrace the process, as if there were anything else to embrace.
Yeah.
Process and evolution and change are not choices, that they are existential ways of being. And certainly, Dan, I see that all the way through your gender work, all the way through your working with Indigenous communities, like waves that move in and out and blur those shores, right? Yeah. Leaving bits and pieces of both as treasures there on the shoreline. So thank you both for this engagement.
Thank you, Elise.
Thanks, Elise. I didn't know you were there. It's great to see you.
Yeah, I just want to say that, I don't know if you were quoting Manning yesterday when we were talking, you were talking about books as an archive. Well, that's right.
Shall I say?
Yeah, say it.
I mean, Aaron Manning makes this kind of flexible, flowing movement between archive and anarchive. And Dan and I were talking last night over a couple of beers, and we were talking about, Dan was saying, well, maybe we should think less in materiality of the book as artifact, as something which is fixed. What Manning talks about is she problematizes the notion of the archive as being fixed, as being simply substantive, and says we should think about the writing, the inquiry as always being on the move. So she privileges the notion of anarchive, over archive, where the latter is fixed, whereas the anarchive is much more fluid, much more wild, much like, as Elise was saying, much more flowing and much more about movement. Sorry, Dan, I don't want.
That's exactly what I wanted you to share. That was the plan. That was the plan. And like an anarchic archive.
Yeah.
I like that. One of the things that we came up at one point a couple of years ago in our research lab at RMIT, my university in Melbourne, where I work, we have a research lab called Creative Agency, like the name of the book. And one of the things we talked about was this idea that, in the beginning, when you start publishing books, at least for me, it's so amazing. And, the interwebs are flooded with people like, it's finally in my hand. And that is an amazing moment. But as time has gone on, I've lamented that moment of joy and the material relationship with that book feels like it's shortened. In the beginning, I just used to walk around with my book for like months maybe, and I was like, have I mentioned I wrote a book? And as it goes on, and living with someone as prolific as Stacy as well, Stacy Holman Jones, my partner, we just have like there's like the books that we use, and then there's our books, right? And they're just like there on a shelf, and they are an archive. They are kind of like dare I say, a dead archive. And so one of the things we said in the lab was, maybe we should have these celebrations while people are writing and thinking. And, oh, I put pen to paper today. that part of the process, or I had a new idea, or I linked it with Manning, or those kind of dynamic moments. And when it's published, we should have like a wake or a memorial for it.
Yeah.
And what that might provoke. I mean, we work within university contexts that only value the materiality of that book. It must have come out in some sense or another, but it can be the work, and is the work of this community, I know, to problematize and make spaces of resistance within those institutional contexts and, neoliberal KPI oriented demands that we have. So I really like that idea a lot, Ken. I love it.
It's a good concept because it also means the wake.
It's
part of the new process.
That's
right.
It's coming out. I love it. Any other questions? Thanks, Elise.
I mean, it's a great question, and it relates to what Dan and I were talking about just now in terms of the anarchive, because and it's a bit like my dad and the wall. The Stones were calling him, the wall was calling him. And I think we all have so much stuff out there. I remember talking to a colleague many years ago who said that when she wrote her thesis, she had another 20,000 words in the can. There are still pieces of film on the cutting room floor. It's that kind of thing. I mean, I wouldn't want to use the word regret. That seems to be too individually emotive. There's always a sense in which you can pull that story to the fore. You've now got to pull that story to the fore, in your writing. That's how I would feel. So I wouldn't. There's always an opportunity to write another story, to give another exemplification. The whole essence of Deleuze and Guattari's collaborative work is that we create concepts. Dan's book is about creative agency, and it really draws from Deleuze and Guattari's work on creativity. That in speculation and experimentation, we invent new concepts. We worry less about what they mean and think more about what they can do. How we can put them to work. So, but thanks for that. It's a great question. It's a great point. No regrets.
So if you're saying that, there's no real distance between now and that, right?
No, I think the last thing I think I said in my piece, it's space-time middling. It's you can deconstruct in the Derridean sense the linearity of linear time. That story as it re-emerged, and I think that's how we work with it. I mean, I suppose I have it. When people who know me, I've got mountains of notebooks and sketchbooks and so on that I'm going to leave to my children. But
they'll be really grateful.
They will. They'll love it. But it's part of that process. The process isn't linear. It's about multiplicity.
You told me you were leaving those to me.
Oh,
To more than one person.
I've always been a bit of a
It's a bit of a bath going on outside now.
Katrina's saying we think we should bring it to a close.
Yep.
Thanks for coming along.
Thank you.
Thanks for talking with us. Cheers.